Welcome to Fossil Creek Tree Farm and Nursery. I'm Max. I'll be the gardening coach today. Today we're going over butterfly and hummingbird plants, and we've got a ton of them. Our cup runneth over. We've got a lot more than I'm going to show you, but the neat thing is we're finally at that point of the season. We're getting warm enough that these plants are really coming into flower. And I haven't seen any hummingbirds yet, but the butterflies are here. First of all, you know, to do them in a pot, you can do things in a pot that would be sufficient to draw butterflies and hummingbirds. You just use potting soil. The bigger the pot, the better. You can sort things in it, and if not, if you've got a flower bed to devote to it, that's even better. Use things like planting mulch to augment the soil. The happier that the roots are, the better the foliage and the blooms are going to be. Of course, one other bit of guidance, if you're going to do perennials or annuals, but kind of especially perennials, which are going to be in a gallon-sized pot. It's kind of neat if you're going to do several. You might maybe not do quite as many varieties, but do more of each individual plant. That will give you more of a presence. If you do one of this, one of that, one of that, then it can look kind of jumbled. But if you do 3 of a particular plant or 5 of another plant, then you fill up enough space to where it really shows up, not only for people but also for the hummingbirds and butterflies. And you can certainly do, there are plenty of perennials and annuals that will do the job. And the neat thing is that it's kind of a toss-up as to who's going to like them more, the butterflies, the hummingbirds, or us. And there are not only flowering plants, but we have a few of the host plants which the butterflies will eat, which kind of brings them in. In fact, every year we always have some of these guys that'll bring them in. As long as I've had these on a shelf, swallowtails show up. You know, you can do dill, and we also have a bronze fennel and a sweet fennel and parsley. They like all of those, and every year when we have those out on our herb table, swallowtails show up. In fact, last year I saw one of the first ones show up, and it was kind of flitting around the dill, and I let her finish. And when she left, I went over and just kind of looked on the back of the foliage, and there we had butterfly eggs. So we left them there, and I guess within about 10 days or so, we had big caterpillars. The swallowtail caterpillar, it may not be as big as my little finger, but it's big, and it's got white and yellow and black stripes, so it really shows up. And we, in fact, once we have enough to where they get to have their fill, and we still have plants to sell, but oddly enough, when they show up and customers are buying the dill or fennel, half the people select the ones that have caterpillars. About half go either way. Half want them without caterpillars, and half like them with caterpillars. And I've seen customers go out of here with 6 of them, and every one of them had a caterpillar on it. So they're fun. My grandson Malcolm, he did this. I guess it's been 2 or 3 years ago. He had a real big fennel plant in his garden, and at one point I think I stopped counting at about 40 or 50 on how many caterpillars were on it, because it was a big plant. And since it was so big and vigorous, it was really no worse for wear for all the caterpillars that were eating on it. and he got to see 2 or 3 generations, because they feed and then they make the chrysalis, and he watched several of them as they came out of that and unfurled their wings for the first time. So he's quite a little budding naturalist, but it'll be a kick for everybody. And this one is lemon verbena. I don't know that it has anything to do with butterflies, but we just got it in, and when I was picking these out, I noticed it, and you just can't beat that fragrance. So he got to show up too. And of course, there are odd things like wax leaf ligustrum. It makes a real big shrub. It can get 10 feet by 10 feet. And of course, in the spring, it has very tiny flowers, but they're in big clusters. And they're a pretty good magnet for butterflies. In fact, a few years ago, I worked at a nursery that had 2 big ones at the front. And when they went into bloom, I didn't even try to count them, because each one of them had, you know, a couple hundred butterflies on it. And at one point, I counted 6 different species on one shrub, and it just looked like, from a distance, it looked like the whole shrub was moving because there were so many there. But a word to the informed, insect populations, you know, do this. Well, the following year, when they came into bloom like that, I was prepared for the exciting show. The previous year, I think there were like 400 butterflies on there at one time, and then the next year there were 4. So who knows? But they fluctuate. So it may take a little time, but the more items you have and the longer you have them, the more likely you are to have the butterflies and hummingbirds show up. In fact, this morning, while I was grabbing one of the plants that butterflies really love, verbena. I was picking this up to use it to show the blooms, and there was a little, I didn't have my glasses on, and there was a little bit of yellow on here, and I picked it up and I thought, oh, I don't want to have a yellow leaf on there. What is that? And then when I touched it, it was a little skipper butterfly. He's already in attendance. He didn't show up for the show. I don't know. I guess he got stage fright. But anyway, there are a bunch of plants that butterflies and hummingbirds like, and not surprisingly, the ones we're going to look over, almost all of them are extremely sun and heat tolerant, so they'll go all through the summer into the fall. The few that don't, they'll survive the summer and pick up again in the fall. So a very long season, and they're very showy. Of course, I picked up a verbena. Both of them, hummingbirds and especially butterflies like those. And of course, that was a purple. We've got them in peach and red, a few other colors too. We probably have some white and pink over there. Very tough, pretty low to the ground. Low water use. Those typically, it can't get too hot for them. You just don't want to keep the soil soggy. They like it a little bit on the dry side. And I guess I'll go through, if you want to have, we'll hit butterflies first and do some of the things that are the most dependable. If you want to have butterflies, there are a handful of plants that if you have those, you're going to have butterflies. Lantana is one of them. Butterflies love it. If you've got lantana, you're going to have butterfly visitors. Numerous different colors. Some of them that we have are the shrub type, like this one's a Dallas red, and then we've got kind of the designer types, which are just as heat tolerant, but they don't get real big. They're good for, especially for use in pots, especially mixed pots, because they're not going to overpower their neighbors. But very tough plants. course, the other one is zinnias, which we have. This one here is Profusion White. This one, I think, in the year, this variety, Profusion, it was a gold medal winner in the year 2002. Not surprisingly, it's still in production because it's such a tough plant. Very sun and heat tolerant. You know, some of the older zinnias, you know, by the middle of the or late summer here, they might be a little worse for the wear. This one goes all the way through into the fall. You don't have to deadhead it. It stays pretty, and if you've got them, you're going to have some butterflies. And of course, I've got some salvias here. That's another one that this is this guy here, the Color Spires, crystal blue, and I've got a few. Of course, not surprisingly, one of the plants that if you have it, you're going to have butterflies, butterfly bush. And the neat thing about the ones that are out now, most of them are fairly compact. You know, this one, it's a new guy. Pugster is, that's a series of them, Pugster, and that one's that color. They're just beginning to bloom now. We've got another one over here. And you can kind of tell by looking at them that they're going to be on the compact side. They're heavily branched. And this one is just beginning to make buds. And this is a Pugster Blue. I think we have over there Pugster White. Of course, very heat and sun tolerant. And of course, this guy's got, you can't quite see them all, but buds all over it. This is the first guy out of the chute. And of course, one thing that you can do, especially since they're compact, is, and this is the same case with a lot of the salvias. You know, this is the first one to bloom. Now, when it gets past its prime, right behind it, you've got other buds coming on. So you can just take scissors and snip it out, and these others will take over, and always have a really neat appearance. Oh yeah, here it is. Of course, speaking of the salvias, this one is Salvia farinaceae, or you may hear it called mealy cup sage, and this one is one of the most popular varieties, Victoria Blue, and it gets about 2 to 3 feet tall and wide, just beginning to bud up now. Is a neat color of blue, which is looks neat with orange, yellow, pinks. Very tough plant. And here we have, for the first time, I've seen this in magazines and books forever, and now we have it. This is a verbena, bonariensis, which is, you might also see it referred to as a Brazilian verbena, or its nickname is verbena on a stick. These guys, they don't fill out a whole lot. Very little in the way of foliage. These will get 3 feet tall. Some of the species can get 5 or 6 feet tall. This is a kind of a purple one, and it's just now doing buds. And the nickname, that verbena on a stick, is because very slender stems, tall, not that much foliage, so when you look at it from a distance, it just looks like green stems with the flowers on it. So they're a super neat plant. It's tall. If you wanted you can do it in the ground, or it'd make a super neat thing in a big container in the center that would be one of the tall things, kind of the thriller of the pot, and blooms all through the summer into the fall. Can't get too hot for it. And then of course, so we've got verbena, lantana, butterfly bush, zinnias. If you have those, you're going to have butterflies. Another neat plant to put with them is gomphrena, or purple buddy. Of course, it comes in pink and white also, and they're just now budding up. It's a lower growing, but it's kind of neat because it's got a different flower form. These will get bigger. They'll get to be about the size of a grape as they mature, and extremely heat tolerant. Blooms all through the summer, into the fall. Of course, we'll branch out a little bit. Pentas, those are very attractive to butterflies, and hummingbirds, but they come in a bunch of colors: pink, white, purple, red. Good assortment of colors. Another plant that blooms all the way through the summer into the fall. And I brought this one up. If you looked at our Facebook, we posted, I grabbed a picture of this guy a couple days ago because he had a huge swallowtail butterfly on it, and he was hitting the petunias and the verbenas that we have in there. So just an example of how you can combine plants that will accentuate the attractiveness and the attraction for the butterflies. Of course, I'll touch on a few of the other perennials. Of course, purple coneflower, which now there must be 40 varieties, but that blooms through the summer. Deadheading it helps to keep it continuing to bloom. And of course, coreopsis, another perennial that loves the heat, blooms through the summer. And of course, those are also magnets for butterflies. And well, we'll move on to kind of hummingbird specials. Now, last year, when I was standing out in our perennial area, we had Turk's cap, rock rose, and I can find them all. We had fat-faced kufia, which they're just beginning. So we had that one, and the rock rose, and who else? Let's see. We had firebush, and flame acanthus. This guy's not in bloom yet, but he will be covered with orange blooms. And I saw a hummingbird showed up. He did a flame acanthus, and we had several. We worked them all over, and then he worked over the firebush, which we had a bunch of those. He worked over all of those. Then he worked over the bat-faced kufia. And then he worked over, I was surprised, he did the rock rose, which I see, you know, it's covered in a lot of books, and I don't think I saw any of them that said that they attracted hummingbirds. Evidently that hummingbird, he hadn't read any of those books, so, but he just didn't land on one and then say that's not for me and go away. There were, you know, 20 of them, and he covered all the blooms, and he must have been here for 20 minutes and hit everything before he left. And I meant to bring over a Turk's cap, which we have them now. They look really good. They're not in bloom yet, but they bloom all through the summer into the fall, and they're a hummingbird magnet. And of course, the cannas, especially the red guys. Now, this is another one that I've seen it mentioned in a lot of books, and they don't say it likes hummingbirds or hummingbirds like it, but I've been to I enjoy going to the Trials Garden at the Fort Worth Botanical Garden, and they have a big variety that blooms this color. And every time I've been there in the summer when these guys are blooming, there's a hummingbird that makes the rounds of these. So he's another one that hasn't read all the books, so he just goes to what he likes. And then of course another one that the books do mention, the coral bills or heuchera. Their claim to fame is their neat foliage, come in a bunch of neat colors. They're evergreen, they're perennial. They will do shade as long as it's not too dark, and do, you know, and also some morning sun. But the little spikes that they put up with the little blooms on them, that's what the hummingbirds visit. So that's kind of a neat one. And that one would be since they're compact and evergreen, that one is a winter hardy. That one's a natural for putting in with, you know, in a pot with, you know, other annuals and or perennials. It's going to hang in there. Of course, one of its requirements, it wants to have pretty good drainage, which is an easy thing to do in a container. And of course, the firebush, I mentioned it, and I sure thought I brought one up here, but now I don't see it. But they're extremely heat tolerant. They've got a kind of a tubular flower. Kind of tubular flower similar to that, but they're kind of grouped together. It's extremely heat tolerant. And it's one of the plants that we had that one butterfly visited all of them that we had last year. Of course, we also have more than one variety of the cigar plant, different kind of kufia, blooms all through the summer and into the fall. And hummingbirds like that one. And then the yellow shrimp plant, just beginning. And you can see the yellow here, and it will do a pretty fair amount of shade, morning sun. Now it could probably take quite a bit, but as the summer heats up, it would prefer to have midday and afternoon shade. And of course, the bloom hasn't gone far enough for you to see, but the yellow part, those are just bracts. They're kind of like colored leaves, but when they mature, it'll have little white tubular flowers, and that's what the hummingbirds are going to go for. But that also makes a neat plant in a mixed pot. And of course, another one that he's not showing his true colors yet, but this guy has a tubular type flowers, called a firecracker plant. He'll trail over. He's real ferny looking, so he'll have not only a neat color and super tolerant of the heat, but he'll have some movement, and he'll, a good one for the edge of the pot, because he'll trail over the edge. One of those that the foliage is just as much of a contribution as the bloom. We're getting full. And of course here's a couple of the bigger guys, Esperanza. We've got the original yellow. These are technically a tropical tree. Here in the winter they'll freeze to the ground. Most of the time they would come back, but they're extremely heat and sun tolerant. They bloom all through the summer, way into the fall. And this is one that when this flower stalk fizzles out, you just snip it off, and it's like the others. There will be buds on either side. In fact, you can kind of see it on that one. He's got buds here on both sides. This guy will bloom first, and then these two on the sides will take over. Very tough. Those can get 3 feet or more. Just they're limited by how much they can grow, you know, in a single season. But last year I had one of these orange ones like this, and it looked good in the first part of the summer, but then as we hit the middle of the summer and it went toward the fall, it just kept growing and growing and growing and blooming. It started out really pretty and ended up, you know, borderline spectacular, but very tough, very colorful. And if you want to go big, here we are, going big. And this is a variety of the trumpet creeper. This one's a new one this year that we have. It's Madame Rosie, which is a really neat color. And of course these guys are gonna take up some space, you know, 10 to 15 feet tall.
Yeah, it's kind of an odd question. Do you have any like little ceramic mounds?
And just depending on how you trim them as to how wide they get. But
okay, all right.
Bloom through the summer. A very neat plant, very showy, and a hummingbird magnet. And I couldn't bring everybody over here. I meant to bring a red yucca, and those, we have those on the other side of the building with the cactus and the yuccas and the agaves. Not needless to say, full sun, but they send up there is a yellow variety, not as many of those. Most of them are like the ones we have that are coral red color. They send up multiple spikes through the summer. They are a hummingbird magnet. We always have them over there, and every year through the summer I'll see hummingbirds zoom up out of nowhere. They hit all the blooms and then depart, and or they will, you know, hit our perennials also, but they always show up with the red yuccas. And of course those are the blooms are really neat about them. Of course, don't let yucca put you off, because they're not pokey. They just have relatively soft leaves that come out, arch out, and ultimately they just, as they grow, they get to be a bigger and bigger clump. They can get to be like 3 feet wide, 3 feet tall, and when they get to that point, they're going to send out just a ton of the bloom spikes. And if you want to augment your butterfly feeding or hummingbird feeding, we also have just multiple feeders and liquid, so it doesn't have to be all one or the other. You can do both. Nobody gets tired of butterflies or having too many of them. So, and of course with this one, it's a neat thing to hang, you know, in a patio area or from the eave to where you can see them from inside. But those really work. And let me see if we have anybody that hasn't had their day in the sun. Of course, there's a tropical plumbago. That's more for butterflies, could be attracted to that, and if they aren't, as far as I'm concerned, you can't have too many blue flowers in the landscape or in a pot. And if you're gonna do that, another one that's not a big showy plant, but Mexican heather, a super kind of companion. Looks neat with a bunch of the other flowers. It's not a showstopper in itself. You know, it's a low, pushy thing, but extremely heat tolerant, and will go all through the summer. And a lot of times these they'll freeze to the ground in the winter, but I think more likely than not, they will come back from the roots. I've seen that happen for years on some that I'm familiar with, but neat little plant. And I think that covers all our contributors. And of course, I didn't really mention a lot of them, but petunias, like the wave petunias are really good, or supertunias, those kind of things. Butterflies really go for those. So, and I guess that will do it. Are we going to do any questions, or did we have any questions?
You got them?
Okay. Well, thanks for tuning in.